In this video, we're going to learn how to use methods to pass by reference. Now, in the previous video, you should have seen how to pass by value using methods. Passing by reference is similar in some respects to passing by value, but there are a few very key differences. So let's get started. The purpose of our program is we're going to have numbers entered in two text boxes, and the number entered into the first text box will be increased by +1, whereas the number in the second text box will be decreased by 1. So that's the purpose of this little program here. So here's our initialized button click method, and I'll go ahead and assign values to our text box items. I'll pause the video while I do that. Okay, all done with that. And what we're going to do now is we're going to create our method that will act to increase or decrease our variables. So let's again do private, and we're going to have the return type be void, which, if you remember, void means that there will not be any return statement. Usually when you're passing via reference, you will not use a return statement. That's not, always going to be the case. You can use return statements when you're doing passing by reference, but it's not required by any means. So we'll call the method increment decrement, like so. Okay, so we're going to now assign our parameters, or our arguments. So in order to pass something by reference, we could do something like we did with our passing by value example, where we did decimal x and decimal y. But this would indicate that we're still passing by value, which we don't want to do. Now, there are two ways you can pass by reference. I'll go over both of these examples in today's video, but let's start by using something called the ref keyword. So ref basically means that we are now going to pass in some values into x and into y using passing by reference. So what's the difference between reference and value, passing by reference versus passing by value? When you pass by value, basically what you're doing is in your call statement, like down here, so when you're passing by value, what you're doing is you are just copying the values that are in the call statement, and you're pasting those copies into your arguments in the method itself. But that's not what passing by reference is. Passing by reference doesn't copy values. It sends a memory location to the method. So what does that mean? Well, whenever you declare and initialize any variable, that variable needs to be stored at a particular location in your computer's memory, or in other words, in your computer's RAM. When you pass by reference, what you're actually sending is the address, or the location in RAM where that particular variable is stored at. So I'm just going to make something up. I'm going to say that maybe numinc is stored at RAM location M25, whereas numdec is stored at RAM location M72. I'm just making this up. I have no idea if these are even valid memory address categories, but anyway. So instead of sending the value of numinc or numdec to x and y, what we're actually sending is M25 or M72, the actual memory locations. What this means is that when x or when y gets updated inside this method, it also gets updated. It basically updates the value at M25 or M72, which means that the numinc and the numdec variables inside this method right here, they also reference M25 and M72. So as a result, when passing by reference, when you change x or y inside this method up here, then you're also at the same time going to be changing numinc or numdec inside this method over here, because you're not actually changing a hard value. You're altering the memory location, and that memory location is referenced by both numinc and x, as well as by numdec and y. Kind of makes sense, hopefully? It's harder to understand than passing by value. If you don't understand it at first, don't feel bad. It took me a while to understand this as well when I was learning it. The first class I took was a C++ class, not C#. And C# I think is actually easier than C++. But anyway. So let's see this in action. So what we're going to do here is we're going to, remember, numinc references x and numdec references y. And they both reference the memory locations M whatever. I just said M25 and M, I think it was 72. I made those numbers up. The M locations I made up, they don't mean anything. They're just for the purpose of illustrating the concept. So, anyhow, what we're going to do here is we're going to go to x and increment by +1, and then y we're going to decrement by -1. And that's it. So let's take a look and run the program and see if it works. Oh, I almost forgot. One thing before we run the program, I'll need to cancel this program running really quickly. I almost forgot that we need to also update the output. So our text boxes, txt number inc, will equal the newly updated example of numinc. There we go. Now this should work properly. So let's abort this obnoxious AVG scan. Let's say 10, and let's say 7. So this should update when I click this button. It should say 11.6. And there we go. And we'll just do it again and again and again as much as we want. And we can just keep going on forever if we want to. But that is a very basic example of how to use passing by reference. Now, I told you that there are 2 ways to pass by reference. You can use the ref keyword, but you can also use something called the out keyword. They both pass by reference, but they have unique situations or unique scenarios that they should be used in. The ref keyword should be used if you have already assigned values to the parameters. If these 2 values have already been initialized prior to getting passed into the method, then you need to use ref. However, there's also the option that says if numinc and numdec, if you've declared the values but you haven't actually initialized them, then you can still pass these variables into the method, but you need to use the out reference word instead. So out, out, out. Alright, so what does this mean for us now? Well, we've passed these variables, or we basically passed the memory locations into the method. And now that the memory locations are in the method, we need to assign values to those memory locations to begin with. As you can see, x and y are both showing errors. The reason why is because x is being incremented, or it's trying to increment x, but there's no value that's actually been initialized to x yet. So what we need to do is instead, we'll do the initialization statement inside the method. So I'll do this really quickly so you don't have to wait and watch me type this out. Alright, and there we go. So now it should work. Let's run the program just to test it to make sure everything looks happy. So we'll do, let's say, 5 and 12. So this should update to 6 and this should update to 11. And it works. And it keeps working. So that's how to pass by reference. That's how to use the out keyword versus using the ref keyword. It's very important to understand the difference between both of them. Using ref keywords, the arguments being passed need to be initialized before the arguments get passed. However, using the out keyword, the arguments don't need to be initialized until after they get passed, until you're already inside the method. And keep in mind that there is absolutely nothing keeping you, or there's absolutely no reason why you can't pass different types of, there's no reason why you can't pass by value and by reference and by out reference at the exact same time in the exact same method. So in these examples, I've only passed by reference 1 or twice at a time, and then I've only passed by out reference. But you could pass by reference and by out and by value. You could combine passing by value, by reference, by out, however you want. You could have, reference, out, reference again, value, wherever you want. And again, you absolutely have the ability to put in a return statement. So maybe you want to do a return statement with a string, and we'll just say return, this is a string, and then message box dot show there we go. So yeah, that's passing my reference. Hopefully this video has been informative, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video. Have a good day.